Listen, the Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea podcast. It's about to start. I can tell from the intolerable amount of smugness it suddenly generates.
Hi there, and welcome to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. This is Bryan, and I'm with my friend Jeff, and we'll be talking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in all its forms. But before we do that, let's listen to a message from one of our proud sponsors.
The following is a public service announcement.
Hello, I am Dr. Julie Lesnick, professional earth scientist and amateur spelunker and rockhound. I am here to tell you what to do if you find yourself stuck in a crack in the ground, underneath a giant boulder you can't move, with no hope of rescue. You should consider how lucky you are that life has been good to you so far. Alternatively, if life hasn't been good to you so far, which given your current circumstances seems more likely, consider how lucky you are that it won't be troubling you much longer.
Hey Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you?
Well, I'm feeling cinematic.
Cinematic? In full HD?
In full HD in Dolby.
Dolby, there you go.
Because we're going to be talking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie that came out in 2005.
2005.
Wow, that was a long time ago.
It was.
Yeah, so when this came out, it was a must-see.
Absolutely.
I mean, every Hitchhiker's fan has been waiting for this movie to happen since the book came out. And it came close and didn't happen and came close.
Yep, I remember.
And finally it happened, so it was a must-see, and we had to see it together.
Absolutely. I remember it was a great time.
Yes, it was. We even made shirts for the occasion.
We did. Some of your earliest shirts.
Yes, it is. And we've talked about that a little bit before. And again, it's available again on our page. Don't panic on the front, 42 on the back.
Yep.
We were the only ones that had anything dressed up like hitchhikers, if I remember.
Yeah, they knew we were fanatics at that point, didn't they?
We weren't able to see it opening night or even opening weekend. I couldn't just travel whenever I wanted to. So I had this job that I had to be at. I was working the night that it opened, and so I remember buying a tie with dolphins on it to wear during opening night of Hitchhikers. Nobody had any idea why I was wearing a dolphin tie, but I was wearing a dolphin tie.
There you go. Dedication.
All right, Brian, so before we get into this podcast, I want to talk about the last bonus episode we did where we were answering questions about the restaurant at the end of the universe.
Great. That sounds wonderful.
There were two different questions, and the answer to both of them had to be, you might have got the joke if you read the book rather than listen to the book.
Yes, that's correct.
And that makes me think that a lot of people who are listening are saying, and I'll do this in a Douglas Adams type of joke, that by only listening and not reading, I'm either lazy, illiterate, or both. But in my defense of that,
okay,
here's what I want to point out. In both instances of both of those jokes that were missed because it was listened to rather than read, first appeared in the radio series.
I remember you pointed that out, and I don't know how.
I knew that for one of them.
Yes.
But now I've realized it's actually both of them. Both of them were in the radio series first, and you don't get it unless you read it.
Right. And you know what? That does make sense, because I thought a lot about the second one, which was the improbability and the unprobability field.
Right.
And the more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, it does make sense that it couldn't be an improbability field, because then it would be improbable or not likely, if you will, that they would be able to penetrate it. But an unprobability, meaning that it is probable, is a different type of field. So it may have been Adams correcting himself when he wrote the book.
I believe it says unprobability field in the radio scripts.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so I think unprobability is right, and they just needed to really enunciate to make the difference.
Yeah, which they didn't, at least as far as I know.
So the first thing I want to talk about the movie is the cast.
Okay.
Because I think this cast was perfect.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely.
So I'm just going to go down in the order that I have them. I'm going to say a little bit about each person, and if you've got something that you want to share, please do. So Arthur Dent was played by Martin Freeman.
Right, and this...
I had no idea... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say about the same thing. I have no idea who he was or where he's gone since.
Right. So this was a tall order. I mean, this is Arthur. This is an actor that I've never heard of playing the most important person in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he nailed it.
Yes, he did a really good job.
I loved him in the role.
Mm-hmm.
After this, I've seen him in 2 other things, which I really liked him in.
Okay.
He was in season 1 of Fargo.
All right. Haven't seen Fargo.
Oh, Fargo's good. You just need to watch season 1 just to see Martin Freeman because he's outstanding in it.
Okay.
And then he played opposite Benedict Cumberbatch in Sherlock.
Oh, okay.
He played Watson.
Oh, really? And I think I've seen Sherlock, and now that you mention that, I think I do recall.
And then we have Arthur's counterpart, Ford Prefect, played by Mos Def.
Yes.
Did you have any idea who he was before this movie?
I did not. And again, I very little information about Mos.
Yes. So I had no idea who he was before this movie, and I have no idea who he is after this movie, but I loved him in this role.
Yes, he did an excellent job. He really did.
Part of it was, and I don't know if this is because he is such a good actor or such a bad actor, but Ford is supposed to be not quite right. You know, you're supposed to say he kind of looks human, but he just doesn't act quite right, and he had that down.
Yes.
It was incredible.
Yes, he did a very good job in the role. He's very convincing as Ford.
Then we come to Zaphod Beeblebrox, played by Sam Rockwell.
Another actor, I had no idea who he was or what he's done since.
Oh, man. Sam Rockwell, when I first saw him, he didn't stand out to me, but looking through his filmography, he would have been in Galaxy Quest. That would have been the first thing that I saw him in.
What did he play in Galaxy Quest?
I do not remember the character's name, but he was not one of the main crew. He was in there. He might have been at the convention or something, but it was a minor little role.
Okay.
Then he played one of my all-time favorite people in a movie, and so he rocketed to the top of my favorite actors.
Oh, really?
He played Chuck Barris in Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. I think I've seen it, but I can't recall.
Oh, it's a brilliant book and a brilliant movie about Chuck Barris writing we'll call it, embellished autobiography where he is an assassin for the CIA and he uses his cover as a chaperone for his game show dates that get sent all over the world to do his killing.
Okay.
It's brilliant.
Maybe I haven't seen that film. Because I didn't think you were talking about the same Chuck Barris from the Gong Show. But you must be.
Yes, absolutely. That's it, yes. Chuck Barris Productions didn't just have the Gong Show, but it had the dating game and the newlywed game and all that other stuff. Okay. And they would send the winners of the dating game on these trips.
Okay.
And you're going to France. You're going to wherever. And they couldn't just send these people alone. They had to have chaperones.
Oh, really?
So he would go with them. And that was his undercover of how he was in France when he had to do these assassinations for the CIA.
I guess I'm going to have to check that film out because I don't recall having seen it.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. How did you like the portrayal of Zaphod in this?
I'm not 100% sure. You know, it's funny. We're talking about the actor, and I think the actor did a pretty good job. But the way I know we'll get into this some more detail maybe, but the way they did his head and his third arm and stuff, I felt it a little awkward.
There were things about that I felt were weird, but I think he played it a little too over the top. I wish he would have restrained himself a little bit in his acting, because he just seems to be a total jerk all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded like he was doing an exaggerated George W. Bush impression.
Okay, I didn't get that, but I do get it.
Oh, you didn't? Man, every time I saw him, I kept seeing or hearing George W. Bush.
Oh, really? Oh, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Never happened to me, but you are right. He doesn't seem to, he goes over the top, and it's not until, I don't even know, is it 3/4 of the way through the film where he actually becomes empathetic, and we'll talk about that I saw a better side of him and a better acting part of him.
Correct.
So that's kind of where I was at.
So we'll move on to Trillian.
Oh, please do.
Played by the astounding and beautiful Zooey Deschanel.
Oh my gosh, yes.
She totally mesmerized me in Elf. She stole that movie in my mind. And I was super excited to see her as Trillian. And I thought it was the perfect role for her.
Mm-hmm. And I was excited to see her as well. It's funny that you chose Elf, because for me, and I think we talked about this once before, it would be 500 Days of Summer. What a great movie.
Yes, I do remember that. Yes.
And I just loved that movie, and I do like her portrayal in this film and that film. The other piece that's there, of course, I'm sure you're probably going to mention her, but her sister. I mean, you can't talk about Zoe without talking about her sister. I mean, Emily in Bones. What a great role.
Yes.
They had some good breeding in that family, didn't they?
Yeah, they most certainly did. Yes. Are you familiar at all with Zoe's music?
I did see that on the Wikipedia when I looked up some information, but I'm really not familiar with her singing or her music. She's
in a band called She and Him. Mm-hmm. And it is just fun, little, light-hearted throwback music. It's wonderful. You should check it out.
I will definitely do that.
We'll go on to Marvin.
Oh, Marvin.
The voice was played by Alan Rickman. I do not believe they shoved him into that little, that little costume.
Gosh, I hope not. But maybe that, was the reason for his untimely death, huh?
That could be, yes. Asphyxiation. I have difficulty separating actors from previous roles. So, having Marvin being played by someone who, to me, will always be Hans from Die Hard, it was tough, because I just kept hearing Hans. And there's another whole generation who's only going to hear Professor Snape.
Right.
And I think they could have solved that problem if they just reverbed his voice to make him sound like a robot.
What's funny, I don't really think of Alan Rickman and Hans. I know that was an important role, but I do like him in this role. I do like the voice in this role, I should say.
Yes, he's great. Again, there's my difficulty separating what I hear from what I know I'm supposed to be seeing. And I'm just wondering, because Marvin in the radio series had a reverbed voice. I mean, they did it for the radio series. And even in the audio book, they'll do a reverb on Douglas Adams reading it.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question, but they do make a point. Well, they make the point in the book, so I don't know whether this was relevant or not, that it's a genuine people personality prototype.
Yes.
So maybe they wanted to kind of take away the robotiness of it. I don't know.
Well, that's true, because the Doors don't have a robot-sounding voice.
That's true. They don't.
And then the last one, I didn't write many notes, because a very, very small part. John Malkovich playing Hama Kavula, a character that was just created for the movie. He appears nowhere else in any of the books. But he is an incredible actor, and he's great in everything he does.
Yeah, doesn't he just stand out? I mean, he just stands there and stands out.
Yes. Yes. And he doesn't even have any legs.
I know. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Okay, so I had to add a couple more, if that's okay.
Okay, but before you go on to the couple more, that scene with John walking across the table without legs reminded me of your answer for Gargravar.
Right.
So that made me laugh because of how close it was to how we just talked about that.
Oh, you're right. I didn't think about that. That's exactly true. And it's a mechanical thing. So, that prevents him from having to walk on his hands or elbows.
Right.
Good observation, sir.
So who else did you want to talk about?
Well, I just wanted to mention...
That you didn't send me any notes ahead of time.
No, I know. And I wanted to mention 3 other names here that stuck out to me. Helen Mirren, fantastic actress. Yes. She just is terrific. She has a role as Deep Thought here, the voice part. Love to hear her voice. Love to see her act. The other 2 that I thought were really interesting for choices were Stephen Fry, who plays the guide.
Okay.
Or the book, if you will.
Yes.
And I don't know, did you ever watch Blackadder?
I have not.
Okay, well, anyway, Mr. Bean is the main character, the Blackadder, and Stephen Fry here is also part of that cast, and he just makes me laugh. And, of course, documentaries. I mean, the man is famous for his documentaries, including his documentary with Douglas Adams, The Last Chance to See.
Right,
so,
right.
And I'm sure that was a tribute to Douglas after the fact. And the other one is another one that the kids will know. And that's the actor who plays the voice of Jeltz, Richard Griffiths. He's Harry Potter's Vernon Dursley. And I thought
really?
That was really interesting.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah. It's kind of cool. Similar characters, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
And those are the 3 that I thought we should add.
Yes, absolutely. Good choices. Okay, so now we can talk about the movie.
Okay.
So the introduction of this movie starts out about the intelligent life on Earth and dolphins being the second most intelligent.
Yes.
And a song. And didn't you promise us a song?
Did I promise something like that?
The first thing I noticed about the whole dolphin footage is that it seemed dated.
It did.
Kind of like it was back from the 80s, which I kind of thought was a nice throwback. And then all of a sudden it changed, and then it became a lot more modern, which I thought was kind of cool. Mm. It was sort of like taking the old and bringing it to the new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It was different. It's not what I would have expected. I was kind of a little thrown back when I watched it, and now you and I have watched it a number of times. And I'm thinking to myself, is this the title sequence for this book or for the other books?
Right.
I don't get it.
Yes. Kind of what went through my mind as well. And then the second thing I noticed, and this is going to play out throughout the movie, is that the bit about the dolphins was edited down considerably.
Yes. Well, I'm going to say yes, and...
They cut a lot out.
Okay. Cut a lot of what out? I'm missing something here.
They started this movie out talking about the dolphins being the second most and humans being the third most, but they didn't talk about the most, which is the mice, right, because that's supposed to come out later.
Right.
So my whole idea was, and like you said, what is this opening for, is why did they start out with this as the opening when they weren't going to tell the whole joke?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I guess I felt the same way.
If we're a fan of the book, we know the joke.
Right. And
if you're not a fan of the book, it's just confusing.
It is. But I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but there's a little, I guess, Easter egg in there about this particular aspect of the movie. Again, I'm jumping a little ahead, but I guess that's okay. After the destruction of Arthur's house, we wander back over there out of the bar, and Arthur is wandering through the wreckage of his home.
Correct.
And there's a newspaper laying out in the plain view that says the dolphin's disappearance.
Yes, yeah, they've all disappeared.
That was the only thing I could think of that would tie a link back to the title.
Yes, yeah, I agree. When the movie first starts off, it immediately is letting us know that it's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
They want us to know that, yeah, they know that we know what the story is, but they want us to be paying attention, so they're going to make these little changes. And the first change, because I wasn't expecting it, and I wanted to just, quote the movie along with the movie, made me scream at first, but then I thought about it, and I understand what they were going to do. And do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
The story does not start with a man.
No.
It starts with a house.
Yes, I do know what you're talking about.
I was like, it starts with a house.
No, yes,
start
that was
with
my
a
first
man.
note, and I didn't think you were going there, but you're 100% correct.
So then I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, you're telling me right off the bat we're making some changes. So pay attention.
Yep. Okay, I also noticed that here in the very beginning, after they mention it begins with a man, they say, he's a man that no more knows his destiny than a tea leaf knows the history of the East India Company.
Yes. Yes.
Which I thought was funny because, of course, that goes back to our discussion about the computer and why it might be jammed up and what it was trying to understand. But
yes, it does. Right.
You're right. It definitely was a signal that the movie was going to be different than the book.
Yes. Another thing, like I said at the beginning, that is going to play out through this whole thing, they also know that we know all the jokes.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't seem to want to tell the whole joke. They just want to tell us enough of it so they can say, here, insert the rest of the joke here. But that really does a disservice for the people who don't know the joke.
Yep. I feel like that's going to be a repeated theme throughout this discussion.
Yes, it will be. Over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I did not mind the change of not talking Prosser into laying in the mud for Arthur.
Right.
That is an unnecessarily long scene that I liked the way they handled it.
Yep, I agree.
The inconsistency here would be, since they only needed 6 pints of bitter and some peanuts, why did Ford have an entire shopping cart
full of beer and snacks
when he didn't know they were there to tear down his house?
I don't know.
Right, so he brought a little too much, but it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out.
I guess. And yeah, that was an odd part of it. I did make a note of that. I thought it was strange.
I did like when Arthur was in the mud and Ford came up to him saying, hey, we got to go get a drink. And he's like, but they're going to demolish my home. He's like, wait, how did you know? Like, oh, this. Oh, yeah. Okay. So that was a little thing that they didn't have in the book that I did really like the change.
Yep, I like that. So
when Arthur and Ford did end up at the bar, and Ford was saying, what would you think if I told you I was not from Guilford, but from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Beetlejuice?
Mm-hmm.
Arthur delivering his line of, why do you think that's something you're likely to say?
Right.
Was outstanding.
Yes.
It was perfect. It didn't sound campy. It didn't sound like it was forced. It sounded like that's exactly what he would say.
Yep. I did like that delivery on the approach to that line.
Yes. Then to jump ahead a little bit, because they showed the beginning of it here, we talked about in another episode about the video game how Ford was just coming to Arthur to return his towel, had no intentions of saving him.
Right.
But in this, it shows that Arthur saved Ford's life, so he was just evening the score. Like, you saved me, I saved you, we're even.
Right. Yeah, that was interesting, and I do like the little sequence where he's, standing out in front of a car trying to shake its hand. It was kind of a cute scene, and there's a lot of these just visual jokes that are in the movie, which obviously are difficult for us to relate in a podcast.
Correct.
That was an excellent addition.
Yes, it definitely was. So the story goes the way the story's supposed to go, and Prostetnik Vogon Jeltz announces his demolition, and you see all the ships. And yellow was so important in the radio series, and so important in the book, and they were gray. There might have been a hint, if you really squinted and looked at it at just the right angle, you might see a little bit of yellow, but I was so disappointed that the Vogon ships were not yellow.
Yeah, I did notice that. The whole Vogon culture is kind of gray throughout the whole movie.
Okay, so here's a question for you now.
Okay.
When he did announce the demolition and everybody was complaining, they showed 3 different cities all over the earth that were seemingly yelling in protest that the earth was going to be destroyed. And then they showed a pasture of sheep all buying. Was that a metaphor for something?
100%. They're all sheep.
All sheep. Human beings are just sheep.
I noticed something. Sequentially, they go to the party in this part of the film.
Yes. When they're sitting in the bar before the earth is destroyed, Arthur tells Ford the story of the party.
Right, and I did like that little added joke where Arthur recognizes that Trillian or Tricia is dressed as Darwin.
Right.
She says something about maybe we're all de-evolving, and he says, well, I do want you to know that I don't date single-celled organisms.
Right.
I thought that was a cute little joke.
Yes. What do you think of keeping the graphics of the guide very reminiscent of the TV show rather than bringing them up to modern standards?
I thought it was an interesting choice. I like the portrayal in the movie of what the guide might look like. It's much similar to what we would assume as a tablet or tablet with a cover, that kind of thing. So it feels contemporary enough that it works. Of course, in the book, it's described as a much more textural thing with buttons and that kind of thing. Even here in the movie, Ford tells Arthur to say Vogons, so it's voice activated.
Right.
So it does seem to be a nod towards the future rather than anything that's in the book.
Yes, definitely. In my opinion, every time they showed it, I think they intentionally made it backwards. I think what we would consider the back cover of a book was the front cover of the guide.
Oh,
so
okay.
I thought that was interesting to do that. Because the Don't Panic would have been on what would be considered the back cover. And I think every time it was opened, it was the front cover. They opened it the opposite way of normal.
I didn't really notice that, but now that you say it, I see that it's true.
Something that I didn't get in the book, and I liked how they portrayed it in the movie, is how once they were beamed up to the ship, Ford immediately started to try to figure out how to get a signal to call somebody else to get off the Vogon ship before they got caught.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Yeah, he's walking all over the ship, and eventually he breaks a pipe so he can get a signal to outside, but it didn't really matter because they got caught.
Right. And I kind of also like the subtle changes that they made to the thumb, which in the book, of course, is described as a separate device. But here in the movie, it's really a ring around his thumb.
Yeah, that was cool.
And the sub-ether, they only show it once, and it's a small black rod, I guess, that he flips open the top of.
Oh, yeah.
Closes.
Yeah, it's kind of a square.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of cool. And I also sort of like the scene, again, where Ford is running through the wreckage of Arthur's house and says, "Oh, a towel," and grabs a towel.
Yes. Yep, he did. He definitely grabbed the towel. I thought that the Vogons looked like I would expect Vogons to look.
Yes, I like their portrayal.
But the Vogon guards in their outfits with those masks was disturbing. That was just pushing upsetting to a whole nother level.
I really didn't think about that, but that is true.
Yeah. Oh, just thinking about it now, I'm... I guess I like that they didn't do the whole poem. They just did parts of the poem.
Mm-hmm.
But the poetry appreciation chairs just really had them strapped in. It did not appear that they were connected to it for enhancement at all. So a little bit disappointed in those.
Right. I agree with you on that. Two other things that I was intending to point out. Here's, again, one of those situations where if you know the book and you know the story, you get the reference, but otherwise you just don't.
Right.
You walk into the bridge and he's sitting on a deer-like animal with its back crushed.
Right. Right.
And he's pounding on the jewel-encrusted crabs
Yes.
in his little pond that he has for catching them.
Mhm.
And they never say anything about the crab or what it's there or why he's pounding on it or anything.
No.
They just let it out there for all of us fans to see and enjoy.
Right.
The other thing that I thought was kind of humorous, and this they don't ever talk about in anything, but in the movie, when he grabs the microphone,
Mm-hmm.
it looks to me like Thor's hammer. I mean,
Yes. Well,
it's definitely not a traditional microphone. It's something he's going to beat people with.
how far did it come down?
Oh, from the ceiling?
Yes. Like
I know, it
50
was ridiculous,
stories?
huh? Yeah. And I think that's, it's kind of funny. It's got this thunking, banging noise and it comes down and it's really like a hammer and an anvil. So it's like
Right.
intentionally designed to inflict pain.
And then they get thrown off the ship. That was a laugh out loud moment for me, that whole thing.
Oh yeah, you got to describe that because for me that was just precious.
So they get thrown in the airlock, because resistance is useless. And Ford kind of does that same joke of, oh, hey, I think I can rescue us. Haha, no, I'm just kidding. It wasn't as horrible as it's portrayed in the book or the radio series.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
they're just resigning themselves to the fact that they're going to die in space. And there's flashing lights and these alarms as the airlock is going to be opened. And you're looking at this back wall, which looks like a giant door.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, they fall out the floor.
I think it's brilliant. I just laughed out loud, like you said.
Because I forgot about that part. So
Mm-hmm.
It's been so long since I've watched the movie. I got to watch it again like the first time, and I forgot all those little things.
Yep.
And then, of course, they're rescued by the Heart of Gold. And if there was something ever to cut out to save time, the whole countdown of improbability was a good choice.
Mm-hmm. It would have been extraordinarily difficult to film, I think.
Well, yeah, they tried it once on the TV show, and it didn't really work that well. So
Nope.
they came back as couches,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden they're normal again.
Right.
So I'm going to let you talk about this first. So what did you think of the Heart of Gold?
It's a good question. We talked a little bit about this before, I think. The big round ship, with all of the rounded corners and stuff, they do emphasize that in the book a little bit. Not so much that the ship itself is a globe, but there's slopes and angles and everything making the architects happy, that kind of thing. But I still think it was a kind of a strange choice that they had a big round globe ship.
But the book does describe the Heart of Gold as looking like a sleek running shoe.
You're right.
That orb or sphere in no way resembled a sleek running shoe.
You're right. It didn't.
Marvin's design with the orb for the head, that was perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the Heart of Gold, that was a tough one to take.
Yeah. I'm just laughing because I'm thinking of Marvin.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always a little joke here and there jabbing in there, but at one point when Marvin is bringing them back onto the deck, the main deck, Zaphod turns around with his gun and says, "Freeze!" And Marvin goes, "I'm a robot, not a refrigerator."
Right. Yes. Right. Stealing from Star Trek again.
I just love the little lines that they throw in there.
Right? Stealing from Star Trek?
Yes, they are.
See?
Well, you know, it's funny because I was going to bring this up before, and you were talking about voiceovers and characters. So I'm going to digress for 2 seconds.
Okay.
One of my favorite actors in all the world is Patrick Stewart. And I know we've talked about that before. But for me, it's the mark of an amazing actor to be able to go from the roles that Patrick Stewart can play and still make it believable. American Dad, for me, some of the lines make me laugh out loud because I think about the Shakespearean actor with all this talent and amazing ability saying some of the goofiest lines I've ever heard.
Right.
And my favorite show that I've ever seen, I've seen a lot of this particular movie because they repeat it quite often, but the Christmas Tale.
Christmas Carol?
Dickens' Christmas Story.
A Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol. Yeah, the Christmas Carol with Patrick Stewart is by far heads above one of my favorites of all the Christmas carols that are out there. Amazing actor, and I laugh and I cry and I just really enjoy his work.
Right. So then we cut to Zaphod and Trillian after they have stolen the ship and drop out of Improbability Drive. And every time the ship drops out of Improbability Drive, it goes through different stages of, there's like things are popping up, different flowers and icons and other things. So I did kind of like how that happened.
Right.
And they're just lounging around, and Trillian is wearing Zaphod's underwear and calls Marvin to go get Ford and Arthur. Mm-hmm. And then Marvin is like lowered from the ceiling, which I don't know exactly why he was up there. And Marvin makes some comment about how he won't enjoy it and all that other stuff. And the moment that she says, "We have something that should take your mind off things," they do a low shot from behind her of Marvin, showing the back of her legs and wearing knee socks. And I thought, yep, you got that right. What were we watching again? Yeah. Couple of things. Zaphod repeatedly calls Marvin Giggles, which I thought was great. And did you catch that he does call Ford Ix?
Oh, yes, I did. I made a couple of notes on that. He definitely brings him in. And again, who would know except a stalwart fan about the whole concept of Ix? So why they put it in there, I don't know, but I thought it was hysterical.
No, that's great for the fans. That's what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, like we're mentioning, they're doing partial jokes, wanting us to fill in the rest. But that doesn't help a person. Calling him Ix was so fast that anybody who didn't know what it was about, it wouldn't even register.
Right. Yep, you're right. Well played.
Yes, I thought that was really funny. So then we come to the first main detour of the book. They do not go to Magrathea right away.
Nope.
They go to Viltvodel 6.
Right.
The land with all the Jack Travarded people.
Right. Yeah, I thought this was an interesting twist, but they do go there for a reason. And it's one of those deals where, I mean, only Hama, Kavula, has this cube that identifies the location of Magrathea. So they had to go there in order to get the cube, in order for them to get to Magrathea. It's a logic piece, but it's not explained, really.
Well, yes, but I also have a feeling that they wrote an ending to the movie. Like, how are we going to end this?
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this.
Okay.
All right, well, how are they going to get the gun? Well, let's make sure that they have to go get this gun for somebody else.
Right.
Who should they get it from?
Right.
Let's make, so I think it was reverse engineered.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it served two purposes. One, it has the cube to get to Magrathea, but they also get the gun, which is imperative for the end of the movie.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
I'm going to say that the depiction of the church that he is running that is worshiping the Great Green Arkelseizure could not have been written better.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty amazing. The one thing that bothered me, though, about the scene is that we're told that the Jack Travarded people have 50 arms each, or more than 50 arms each.
Right.
And as we land on the planet and we're scanning through the scene, we actually see a character or a creature that's sitting there in the mud, and he's clearly only got like 6 pairs of arms. Right. And he's using underarm spray to spray his armpits. Yes. And then they roll themselves into the church itself, and there's a statue of a similar type of creature, again, but only with 6 arms.
Okay. All right.
So I'm not sure why they put those creatures in there, and they're the original folks who believed in the Great Green Arkle Seizure.
Right.
But all of the parishioners are bipedal humanoids.
Yes.
I thought that was odd.
Yeah, it was a little bit strange, but they did do the traditional beginning explaining about the Jetravardeds and called them more than 50 arms in the movie.
Right.
And then they don't show 50 arms.
Yes.
Yeah, and then they are the ones who invented the aerosol deodorant before the wheel. And I don't know if you caught it, but when they were panning past the Jetravarded that was using the aerosol and threw it away, there was a bicycle that had square wheels.
Yes. I did catch that.
So, right. So they invented a wheel. It was just square.
Right, exactly. They didn't evolve too well, did they?
They did not. But do you want to talk about the service, or should I?
I had one thought about the costumes, so I don't know whether you want to go on to the service and then I can mention the costume, or were you intending to mention?
No, I had nothing about the costumes. Basically, all I wanted to say about the service is that he's praying to the Great Green Arkle Seizure and the coming of the Great White Handkerchief, and then rather than ending it with Amen, he ends it with, and then the whole congregation goes, Achoo. And then he says, bless you. It could not have been written better.
No.
We're not doing it justice, but it was outstanding.
Yes, it was very good. So one of my favorite parts about that scene is the end of the scene. They all go, Achoo. And then everybody in the audience reaches up to the guy in front of them who happens to have a kerchief or handkerchief on the back of his head and wipe their noses.
Yes. Yeah, no.
So one of the things that I thought was funny, because you mentioned it earlier in the film, they land on the planet and Ford's like, I think I've been here before.
Right.
And then he goes up to the door of the bar and everyone goes, Ix!
Yes.
And he's like, yep, I've been here before.
I don't get the scene with the super gigantic woman, but I'm sure that was just a visual joke.
Well, yeah, I think, isn't that supposed to be our triple-breasted friend?
No, I do not believe that was Eccentrica in any way, shape, or form.
Really?
God,
Okay.
I pray it's not. I pray it's not. Because that's going to ruin a lot of my imaginings.
Okay, let's try to avoid that from now on.
Yes. So while all that is happening and they're at the service and Ford is seeing his ex-girlfriend, the Vogons arrive to capture Zaphod. Trillian has tried to save him by threatening to kill him with an aerosol can. Mm-hmm. And somehow Zaphod gets away, but Trillian is captured. So they need to rescue Trillian. Mm-hmm. So they go to Vogsphere. Another detour from the book. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things that get cut out of the book, and then there are a lot of things that they introduce that aren't in the book, and I always wonder why they introduce things when they're cutting things out. Like, if you need to fill time, I understand introducing new things. Mm-hmm. But when you're cutting out things that I find really important to add other things, I'm going to talk about the thinking cap, which I guess was kind of funny, but it's a joke that went on too long.
Yes.
So this thinking cap looks like a lemon juicer, which helps you focus for about 10 minutes by squeezing a lemon directly into your brain. So
right. And then Ford, of course, says, oh, that should give him some zest for about 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Then there's a bad pun as well. Yeah.
Oh, I love the bad puns. And then, of course, the other little zinger that they throw in there with Ford is that as he's trying to come out and the scene where they're all being fired at, he goes, "Oh man, it's a Belgian bummer out here."
Yes. Do you know my theory on puns?
No, I don't know that I do.
Puns are not just not funny, but puns actually produce a negative amount of humor. And my proof of this is my sister and I were at one of the convention. This wasn't the last one. This was a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. The Confusion convention. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy that was going to be doing and reciting his puns. So we went to that, unfortunately, and we're sitting in there just torturing ourselves with this guy telling these long, meandering stories that ended with just this horrible pun and makes everybody just go, ugh. Anyway, during this pun exhibit or whatever you want to call exhibition, there was this old man in front of us on the aisle that had his bag or something on the floor. And this room is silent while the guy is flipping through his pages, just trying to decide which pun he is going to do. And as this guy leans over to pick up his bag, he just rips one. It is this fart that echoed through the room. Not even a smirk from anybody. These puns sucked so much humor out of the room. Oh. Some guy audibly farted, and all it did was bring us back to zero. There was not a laugh or a snicker or anything. So I am not a fan of puns because they go negative humor.
I'm not sure where to leave that. Because I don't know that I would be on the same spectrum.
No, you can tell us how wonderful puns are.
Well, I don't know how to defend puns.
There isn't.
Except to say that properly used in the right context at the right time, I believe that they can be brilliant. I know that you're a fan of the double entendre.
Yes.
And, of course, that's basically a wordplay type of thing. And for me, puns are wordplay, and I am always intrigued by them.
Yeah.
So I won't go so far as to agree that they provide negative humor, but I don't know if I could go and see someone just give me a whole bunch of puns. But for instance, I've heard one the other day that just made me laugh, and I'll tell you it now, and you see if you laugh, okay?
All right.
All right, you ready?
Sure, I'm ready.
I call my girl Hinges because she's something to adore.
See, no, that's just... We are now going to have to work harder during this podcast.
Oh, no. You could have laughed if you wanted to.
First of all, you know that there was no way I was going to laugh, regardless of how good or bad the pun was.
All right.
Oh, all right. Here, speaking of puns, after they introduced the thinking cap, Ford tells a joke about checking the guide about how to rescue a prisoner from the Vogons. And it said, don't. So basically what they did was they took the how to get a lift from the Vogons from the book, and they just moved it to how to rescue somebody.
Right.
And then there's the whole slapstick part where they're getting slapped in the face when anybody thinks or uses their mind.
The thinking shovel.
And then they stooped to Arthur asking Marvin to give him a hand.
Right.
And then he's trying to use Marvin's arm as a fake gun, to which the Vogon person, are you looking for a robot arm reattachment? I was like, nobody bought any of that. So that whole scene with the thinking cap and the slapping in the face of whatever those were, I didn't quite get it and why it belonged on Voguesphere, but it was humorous watching him. I mean, what's more funny than watching somebody get slapped in the face?
It's literally slapstick.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Is that a pun?
Nope, that was not a pun. That was slapstick.
So this is actually one of my favorite little bits in the film, and I think you're probably going to get there, but I just love it when he opens up the door and he says, "Oh, a queue. Let me handle this. I'm British. We know how to queue." I thought that was hysterical. And then, of course, my favorite Easter egg of all this entire movie is standing in line. Who is standing in line?
The original Marvin. Yes. Yes, he was.
From the original TV show.
Yeah, that was
And they go to the trouble of actually showing him twice, and I loved that.
Yes, that was very, very, very good. Trillian finds out that Zaphod signed the orders to destroy Earth, and I'm not really sure if the way they did this changes the overarching story, because they make it seem like Zaphod didn't know what he was signing because it says love and kisses. So he was just signing autographs and somebody put a Destroy Earth form in front of him and he signed it. But that kind of plays different than the whole overarching thing that we've been talking about when we're discussing the books.
Right. I mean, now that I think about this, there's two things that come to mind. We don't see Gag Halfront except on one shot in the ship.
Right.
When Zaphod is listening to the news.
Right.
Just before Trillian changes the channel on him. There's a shot of Gag Halfront on the TV show remarking about Zaphod. And that's the only reference we have to him.
Right.
In the movie, they don't really discuss why or who destroyed the Earth. No,
it was just for a bypass.
Do they?
No, just for a bypass. There was no other explanation.
Right. Yeah, that did weaken it. And in fact, in my mind, the other thing that weakened it also, of course, is when we understand or they tell us that Zaphod's goal here is to find the question.
Yes.
You know, that's supposedly his motivation, is to find the question.
Right. He was looking for the question. He wasn't... In the book, he was looking for Magrathea.
Right.
Because he was going to find this legendary planet.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's looking for the question.
Right.
Here's something that bothered me because there's... I don't even know how to say this. It's like, why did you do it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a gem of a joke. There's one of my favorite jokes from the radio series. And it's not in the book. Because it was in secondary phase. And secondary phase cut out the whole Intilla thing.
Right.
And this joke was kind of wrapped up in that. So fans of the book would have never heard this joke. So tell the whole joke.
Right.
And what made the joke funny was how absurdly specific it was.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie, Trillian is going to be fed from the bug bladder beast of Traal.
Mm-hmm.
And it just said, what do you do when you're stuck if there's no hope of rescue?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but it was so
right.
general. It was so unfunny. They could have done something so much more of Trillian hanging there saying something like, how am I going to be rescued from the bug bladder beast of Traal? And then the book would say, what you need to do. It's like, there was nothing. It was just so general, and it just bothered me that one of my favorite jokes from the radio series was told, but the reason it was funny in the radio series is not brought to the movie. And I don't know. Did you even notice that they were doing that joke?
Yeah, I mean, I did notice it, but you're right. It doesn't, it falls flat, and I don't know what to say.
Okay. In this, the mice did not just orchestrate the journey to Magrathea.
Mm-hmm.
They actually pushed the improbability button that took them there.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like, are you in doubt that the mice are doing this? You can't be, because here you go. Here's them pushing the button.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're also responsible. The mice are also responsible for disabling the tracking system or the drive system at that one point when they return to the ship and they're trying to go to Vogue Sphere.
Right. I understand needing to cut for time constraints and trying to cut the fluff, but quality jokes come in threes. It's like there's the rule of three.
Yep.
And it's kind of a comedy law. There should be 2 setups and a punchline. And when they were descending to Magrathea, the radio show and the book have 3 announcements. You know, sorry, we're closed. Come on, we're really closed. Okay, here's the missiles. And this time, there was just 2. They got 1 warning, and then they got missiles. There wasn't that second warning, which breaks the rule of threes. However, in the message, I do like the change of their death being monitored for training purposes. That I thought was nice. But the absolute best was the guy making the announcement was Simon Jones, the original Arthur.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so he got his little cameo in the movie. And then, of course, there was the obvious joke, which still made me laugh, even though the first time I saw it, I could recite it right along with it. Arthur says, "We can talk about normality till the cows come home."
Yeah, I
and
love
Ford's
that.
like, "What is normal?" Trillian, just learning her Earth has been destroyed. "What's home?"
Right.
And Zaphod, "What are cows?" So obvious, but funny.
Yep, I love it.
What did you think about the change on Magrathea of how they got into the planet
The warp fields.
versus the crater opening up a tunnel?
Right, and Slarty's car.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't think too much about it, honestly.
Yeah, it was just different. Like I said, they started at the beginning saying, we're going to make things different, but this is a change that was fine because it doesn't change the story. It doesn't really change the joke, but they did really lose the, pardon the pun, impact of a joke when they don't show the crater and the whale meat.
Right. Yeah, 100%. There was something there that did bother me, and that's that deep thought is on Magrathea. I mean, that did bother me because the mice are...
Wow, there's a whole episode that we could talk about why the hell is deep thought on Magrathea.
So should we leave that for another discussion?
That might be our bonus episode. I don't know, but
okay.
Yes, I don't even know where to begin with that. I really don't.
Yeah, we're at the portal, so the team gets split up here.
Right, this team gets split up. They're all arguing after the portal opens up, one of the 3 portals, and nobody knows what to do. And Trillian kind of has this I have nothing to lose look on her face.
Right.
And just jumps in the portal.
Right.
And then the other 2 also do, and Arthur can, kind of waits a while, and then it's hysterical because it shuts off just as he jumps.
Right.
And he just lands on his face in the sand.
Yep, in the snow, in the sand, yep.
And yeah, I guess it would have been snow. The 3 of them are gone, and Arthur and Marvin are left alone. Then he meets Slarty Bartfast. Slarty Bartfast was going to recite one of my favorite jokes, which was the late joke. And I like how he did it. He was so completely awkward and unsure of what he was saying. It was funny.
Yes. He's not the evil menace that appears in the books.
No, he is not. He was all kind of like rolling his arms and like kind of doing a dance like, come on, you'll be late. So that I really like the portrayal of that line. And then they do the factory floor a little bit differently.
Right.
And here they have a backup of Earth rather than rebuilding one from the original blueprints.
Right.
Which ruins your explanation of 6 days, which is hysterical.
Yeah, that is a little bizarre. And there's something else here that I thought was interesting. As he's going through, there are many planets that are in some stage of being constructed as he's going through the factory floor.
Yes.
They don't appear to be being worked on necessarily. And in fact, they've gone to the extent of, if you watch very carefully, and frankly, I did go back and forth a couple of different times.
Okay.
As he's going through, there are scenes of the constructing material areas, and in each time they pass one, sheaves of paper and detritus kind of flow through like there's nobody there. It just kind of whips the wind around and they're all empty. So the only place where people actually are seen is on the Earth. And I'm talking about the Magrathian people.
Right.
But I did think it was odd, like you say, why are there so many unfinished planets here? What that doesn't jive with the concept that we understand.
Having been closed.
Right, exactly. It is interesting, though, that they're pulling out a backup copy of the Earth.
Yes, that was weird. And then they wake up Deep Thought. They're having this conversation with Deep Thought about the question and the answer, and they don't get any satisfaction from Deep Thought. Mm-hmm. But then they just mention the gun.
Right.
And the stairs open up.
Right.
There was no problem getting this gun. The Deep Thought was just going to give this gun to whoever showed up and asked for it.
Well, right. And even there, when he goes into that cavern and retrieves it, it's one of 10 or 12 guns. None of the rest of them are actually there. It seems to be the last one.
Right.
But there are empty slots on the wall where people have shown up and taken it.
Right. Yeah, a lot of empty places. Do you want to talk about what the gun was?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, so the point of view gun that they retrieve is interesting. It's kind of like an analog, if you will, of the perspective vortex.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Created by a group of intergalactic angry housewives.
Yes.
So that they could explain to their husband in a very direct way what their point of view is.
Right.
It's interesting. And I do, in fact, I really appreciate, and I think even we talked about that earlier, this particular scene, because we see some compassion, actually, from Zaphod for the first time as he's being zapped over and over again.
Right.
What do you think of that?
Well, I liked it. It was kind of, in case you were unclear of what was going on and how people felt, we're going to shoot everybody with this gun over and over and over so we can specifically tell them exactly what you're supposed to know.
Yes.
That was a great way to make sure everybody was on the same page for what was going to happen going forward.
And of course, I do like Trillion's line where she says, oh, it won't affect me. I'm already a woman.
Exactly. So that it ended perfectly as well.
Mm-hmm.
They show that Arthur's house is back and they offer it to him and he goes inside. And this is where the whole gang is having a feast.
Yeah, this was interesting. And I do like the scene and I like the way it plays out. But it does leave something open here in the end. If I back up just a moment.
Sure.
I do want to mention that at one point, they do have, again, you talked about the jokes that are there and the jokes that are partially there.
Right.
At one scene here where Slarty Bartfrost and Arthur are flying through the factory floor, they do the joke about the 60s sitcoms.
Correct.
But they switch out 60 sitcoms for cheese.
Right. Yeah. Yes. How do you not know cheese? I can't believe Earth is the only place with cheese.
I don't know. That was what bothered me. It didn't make any sense there.
Yes, they make these little changes. And now I'll talk about that a little bit at the end in our wrap up, my feelings on that.
Okay. Also wanted to point out here that I thought it was cute, and I'm not sure. I've looked at the scene a couple of different times, and I was trying to figure out, and I think I kind of got it, but what I thought was interesting was that all of the helpers, all of the construction people, are wearing red,
Mm-hmm.
and they're wearing these overly large red shoes.
Okay.
and I thought it was really weird because it makes them look like Oompa Loompas, you know?
Okay, yeah.
And I wasn't really sure why they would be wearing these overly large shoes. And if you look closely, they have like Velcro tabs on them. So I guess it's to prevent them from creating footprints or something. I don't know. It was really strange.
That could be booties.
I thought it
Yeah.
was weird. Yeah, they're booties. Like, yeah, exactly. They're booties that are over top of their regular shoes. I guess to prevent infecting the place or something. I thought it was weird.
Right. All of the food and the drinks seem to have been drugged at Arthur's house.
Yes.
And that's why the three others fell asleep and Arthur was kind of immobilized.
Mm-hmm.
And they put on a skull-cutting helmet for him.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and this is where we get the how many roads must a man walk down,
Right.
which gave him pause and like, ooh, hey, that sounds pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And then, nope, they were going to continue on. But, you know, Arthur didn't have very good furniture, so he was able to bust out of the chair. And I think they did a nice job of, he smashed the mice,
Mm-hmm.
and then when he removed what he smashed them with, you could see the two kids or the two girls or the two whatever multi-dimensional, pan-dimensional beings in their
Mhm.
original form,
Right.
and then disappear.
Yes.
Because they're projections into
Right.
this universe.
Right.
He didn't actually smash them.
Yep. I do like that. Oh, bollocks, she says right before they get squashed.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite scenes after this,
Okay.
of course, they're getting shot at by the Vogons, and Ford comes out screaming and waving his towel at this other group of Vogons that had walked around the back of the building.
Right.
And they all go, "Oh my God, a towel!" And they start
towel.
running around
Yes,
the other direction. And then they turn back around and start chasing Ford back again. And Ford comes through, closes the gate, and then one of the Vogons says, "Oh no, he shut the gate. We'll have to go around the other way." Oh, you know, just a funny little thing that they stuck in there.
Right. Well, Marvin does call the Vogons the worst marksmen in the galaxy.
Yes.
And I immediately thought, well, wait up. I thought that stormtroopers were the worst shots in the galaxy.
Wrong galaxy.
But then I realized that they're in a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so they're not in this galaxy. They're the worst shot
time
in
ago.
their galaxy.
A long time ago.
Yes. Right. And then, of course, Marvin gets shot in the head right after he makes that claim. The only good part about Marvin getting shot in the head was his line, "Now I have a headache," because that was perfect. And I think the only reason that they did it was to do this type of version of Marvin gasping back to life with his eyes coming on. And then I think we were supposed to cheer at that moment when we were in the theater.
It definitely seemed to be a critical moment. Emotionally, and the music's all ramping itself up to the climax here. And then
Marvin shoots the Vogon army with the point of view gun, and they all fall over and cry. So that's why I'm saying this whole thing was reverse engineered.
Mhm.
They wanted to find out how they could end the movie, and somebody came up with this idea, and then they had to figure out, well, why do they have the gun?
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't talk about this then, but I'm just going to mention that Humma needed collateral to make sure that they brought him the gun.
Right.
So that's when they took one of Zaphod's head.
Mm-hmm.
And he seemed to have a joke head and a jerk head. And they took the jerk head. And I think that's why he was able to have a little more compassion later in the movie.
Yeah.
Is because the part of his brain that was a jerk was actually totally removed.
I like that explanation.
Yes. Arthur did not make the same mistake twice.
Okay.
The head guy from Magrathea who said they were going to finish the planet was going to give Arthur the opportunity to make any changes he wanted to the planet to see if there was something that, he wanted to be changed. And he decided that he did not need to be on that planet. and he was going to travel the galaxy with Trillian rather than living out his life on Earth Mark II.
Yes, that was a satisfactory conclusion.
And then, did you watch through the credits?
I did.
When they were able to squeeze in one more joke?
Well, yeah, but just before that, the line is that there's a couple different lines that occur right there near the end after the sequence with the Vogons. Ford says, well, I know a great little place to go to eat, the restaurant at the end of the universe. And then Trillian says, I'm a little peckish. And I'm like, why?
Yes.
You just ate a huge meal. You just stuffed yourself to the point where you passed out, and now you're peckish? Okay.
Yes, pretty soon Trillian's going to look like Ford's girlfriend on
the
gentrified planet.
Yep. Of course, then the towel comes back up, and Ford says, you got your towel? And Arthur says, why? He says, you're going to need it. And he says, only always.
Right.
And then Arthur says, I don't go anywhere without my wonderful towel.
Right. Marvin tells the last joke, and his joke was actually what I thought the first time I picked up the book Restaurant at the End of the Universe. So Marvin says, the restaurant's at the other end of the universe, and they turn around and they shoot out the other way. And the Heart of Gold goes into improbability drive, and we see all the flashing icons that ends with the face of Douglas Adams.
Right. And I thought that was interesting.
Which I thought was a really nice tribute.
Yes. And it was funny because you were talking about the titles here. In the titles, they do that wormhole joke where Arthur's statement about his towel go back to the fleet.
Yes.
And cause the war to come to Earth. So they do that joke. I thought it was interesting because they only mention the bejeweled battle shorts. Again, they tell like half of the joke. They don't do the whole thing, but the guide goes through that whole joke where the fleet is eaten by the dog.
Yes. In this version, it implied that both generals were wearing black bejeweled battle shorts.
Exactly.
Not just one of them.
Yes, that's what I thought was odd. Because it's like they're at war with themselves, not two different races.
Right. Yes.
I thought that was weird. And yeah, it mentions in the titles, as you're reading through it, it mentions that the planet shaped as Douglas Adams's head derived from the video game Starship Titanic by Douglas Adams. And Simon & Schuster gave them permission from H2G2 Limited to use that image in the movie.
Oh.
And I thought that was kind of interesting because we're going to eventually get to Starship Titanic, I believe.
So I did not know that Douglas's head was from Starship Titanic.
Yeah, that was really interesting reading through the credits. The only other thing I thought was interesting in the credits, and I probably have to listen to the whole movie 16 times to figure this one out, but it actually said the lightsaber sound effects are courtesy of Lucasfilms, Star Wars and Lucasfilms.
I knew it was a direct ripoff of the lightsaber when Trillian was doing the toast bread as you slice it.
Oh, is that where that sound was?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know where the sound actually was in the movie, but now that you say that makes sense.
Yeah, it was when she had the knife that toasted bread as you sliced it. Because it's a direct ripoff of a lightsaber.
The most useful thing for a lightsaber, right?
Yes, exactly.
Why would you have one otherwise? I mean, all it ever does is cut off someone's hand otherwise, so,
Exactly. Yep. Just hands.
I've never been able to understand the lightsaber. I mean, I know that it's supposed to be knightly and all this kind of thing, but it's too damn dangerous for a person to use a lightsaber.
Yes. Yeah. I totally agree. I absolutely, especially the double one.
Crazy.
So, I can't believe nobody with a sword has ever...
Maybe that's why we're not Star Wars fans.
That could be. Now, don't say that. We're going to alienate a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, you're right.
We love Star Wars. All right, so now that we've ended our discussion of the movie and things that we have felt about it, as a standalone movie, in other words, if you took out all of your knowledge of the Hitchhiker's universe and just watch this as a standalone movie, Do you think it works?
Well, it does have all the plot elements, I guess. I'm not sure, having so much knowledge of everything we know about the rest of the series and all the books and stuff, there was a very specific target audience in this movie.
I agree. I think if you had no idea what this movie was about, you'd have no idea what the big deal was about Hitchhikers. You'd say, well, it's kind of silly and stupid, and they did not do the movie justice. I understand why they did some of the things that they did, but they missed a lot of it.
I agree.
Somehow one of my feelings about it was, I don't know if they know what made the jokes funny in the radio series and the book, because they did so many partial joke telling.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the joke was the whole thing, the whole part of the book that had a joke. You needed all of it. And then they just took a piece and put it in, and I don't think it works like it needs to.
Yeah, the thing that they relied on heavily in the movie seems obvious. It's a movie, so they do a lot more of the sight jokes. There's a lot of physical comedy in this film.
Yes, yeah.
Obviously, when you're listening to the radio show or you're reading a book, you don't have that kind of an experience. So I think they were supplanting the physical comedy and playing down the educational or intellectual comedy that we get out of the books in the movie, the books in the radio.
Yeah. So if you were not familiar with the story, would you have been able to follow this?
I think so. It kind of tightened the plot up a little bit, but it really didn't appeal to me where they did tighten it. So, that's kind of wishy-washy answer.
Well, but it's an accurate answer. The story is simple. This is not a twisting, turning thing. It's a pretty simple story. And it was told in segmented pieces. So I think that the impact was lost. The best example I have is that they're telling the story of Deep Thought designing the Earth as a computer. Mm-hmm. But they tell everything except the reveal that Earth was the computer that he designed.
Right.
And they make you wait all the way to the end of the movie to give you this information. But you might have forgotten the importance of it. Because if you weren't a fan of the show, I don't know if you could remember what they told in the beginning and then the piece at the end.
Right.
Like I said, the punchline of that joke was the Earth is the computer, and that's what they cut out of the first time that they talked about Deep Thought.
Right. Yeah.
Because they wanted it to be a reveal at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the movie represented the book fairly and justly?
I don't know. I'm going to say no. And it's one of these deals in my mind where I like to read. I like the function of reading. I like the way that it creates an image in my mind and it creates a story in my head. And there's generally no movie has ever been able to take that image and that story that's in my head and put it onto film.
I will agree.
So there's always something lost in translation. And
yes.
I think this one, for me, lost a lot in translation.
I think it did too. Do you think this did anything to gain more fans? Like when the movie came out and people who were unfamiliar with Hitchhikers go to see this movie, are they going to leave this movie going, wow, I have to read these books?
That's a really good question.
Well, my answer is no.
No. Well, I mean, yeah, that would be my initial response. I'm a reader, so if I'm intrigued by a plot or a story, I might enjoy some supplemental reading. Frequently, I will say to myself, I don't want to go see that movie until I've read the book. So that's kind of the way I think. So from that perspective, I don't think I've ever gone to a movie and said, oh man, I should really read the book.
Actually, I did.
Okay.
I've got a, or don't I? Or did I do? No. I was going to use an example and I was wrong because I did it the other way around. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to compare this movie and book experience similarly. And I'm not saying they're on the same level or anything, so please don't send hate emails or anything. I read the book 2001, and then saw the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was watching the movie, I thought, it's a good thing I read the book first.
Right.
Otherwise, I'd have no idea what was going on.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think that holds true a little bit for this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Without knowledge of the book, it's not that you wouldn't understand the movie,
Right.
but there would be a lot of it that got lost.
Yeah, there's definitely a deeper appreciation that you and I will have for this movie because there's a ton of sight gags and information in the film that are related to individuals who know the story, and have read about it.
Yes.
So more of an homage to the fans than a opportunity or the ability to create new fans.
Right. And they set up the sequel, so should there be a sequel?
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine a sequel. We know this plot line is there. We know where we could go, but they kind of taken it away because they've made Zaphod's challenge to be that of finding the question.
Yes.
Therefore, where do we go in the sequel? Why do we go anywhere in the sequel?
Right. Well, I guess what I'm going to say is, of course, there should be a sequel. Whatever it is, I will go see it, and I want to see it. And it doesn't matter how true to the book or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
because I just want to have more of this universe. Will there be a sequel? Very improbable. But I don't want to give people the impression that I hated this movie and that it should never have been made, because it's the complete opposite. It's the fact, though, that there could not be a movie made that would have lived up to what I wanted. But for what this was, right. I am very happy with it.
Well, yeah, and that's the other part of this. I mean, you've alluded to it before when you said that you really appreciated the character development that Arthur went through in the movie, the choice of the actor and his acting style, and the connection to Trillian and the subtle little hints. It had that love story approach to it. Boy meets girl, boy
right.
loses
yes.
girl, boy gets girl back. I mean, that's the standard plot line,
yes.
and it's well played out in this movie. So for the lover of love, they would enjoy this film. So that kind of thing
yes.
really is apparent. And for the lover of the fandom, there are also lots of thrilling parts to it. So I too want to make sure that people know that we enjoyed this movie and it was something special to us.
Absolutely. Like we talked about when we were doing the podcast episode about the book just ends. There is no real official conclusion to the book.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to come up with some kind of an ending. So that's why I think they started with the end. It's like, okay, we want to do this book, but it doesn't end. How are we gonna end it?
Yeah, I see what you're saying about how they reverse engineered it so that they could have a solid end to it.
Right. And if you are gonna watch the movie and then read the book afterwards, just be warned, Arthur does not get the girl in the end. There's Arthur and Trillian getting together is not a thing that happens in any other piece of this series that I have come across.
Nope. Well, we get to learn all about the rest of his life when we start looking at the next book and we start talking about the new things that are happening, right?
Yes, exactly. So that concludes what we've talked about the movie. The next episode is going to be about the book, Life, the Universe, and Everything. So look for that the first Thursday of next month. So, say goodbye, Brian.
All right, Jeff, you asked for it, so I'm going to say, so long and thanks for all the fish. So sad that it should come to this. We tried to warn you all, oh dear. You may not share our intellect, which might explain your disrespect for all the natural wonders that grow around you. So long, and thanks for all the fish. The world's about to be destroyed. There's no point getting all annoyed. Lie back and let the planet dissolve. Despite those nets and tuna fleets, we thought that most of you are sweet, especially tiny tots and your pregnant women. So long, and thanks for all the fish.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Look for us the first Thursday of every month for a full episode. We will also release a bonus episode later in the month. A very special thanks goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. We would also like to thank our talented friends and family for their voice work on our introductions and commercials. For his portrayal of Marvin, the paranoid android, for this episode's opening, special thanks goes out to Jim Berard, gifter of the books, who also has a brain the size of a planet. For this episode, special thanks goes out to Dr. Julie Lesnick for our commercial. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareapretyneatidea.buzzsprout.com, where you can find links to all my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube as Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea, on Instagram as Watches Idea Podcast, and on Twitter at Watches Idea. If you'd like to contact us, our email is digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.